welcome those who are on the line at the moment. My name is Milan Patel. I'm the National Standards Officer at Microsoft for the United Kingdom and part of our corporate standards group here at Microsoft. I'm also the chair of the BSI committee for artificial intelligence, and it's through that role that I'm providing this presentation today on what we've been doing in the committee, what the committee's aim is, what kind of standards we're developing, and specifically looking at the AI management system standard and how it can be used to enable trust. So if we get started on what the committee is, what it does. So the BSI Committee on Artificial Intelligence is ART1. We've been established since 2018, and effectively we were established to mirror the JTC1 SC42 Committee on Artificial Intelligence, which was initiated in 2018. And then subsequently, as developments have occurred, we also mirror the CEN-CENELEC Joint Technical Committee 21 on Artificial Intelligence since about early last year, so about a year ago it initiated. We've got a membership of about over 80 people. It's a multi-stakeholder, very diverse group and continually growing. We've got expertise from small, medium enterprises, large organizations, academia, law, and also consumer and trade groups as well, and including members from governmental departments. So, why are we developing standards for artificial intelligence? The primary reason is to enable trust. And so whether it's trust in organizations or enabling the development or use of AI systems in a trustworthy manner, that's really the prime reason for the standards we're developing, especially in Subcommittee 42 from JTC1. So these kind of standards, they're really designed to also enable accountability, improve or provide guidance on governance, risk management, specifically for artificial intelligence, and also to help organizations responsibly use and develop artificial intelligence systems. So as a result of enabling trust, the aim is then to improve market adoption of technologies such as artificial intelligence, and effectively develop an environment or an ecosystem where trust underpins the use of this technology in a widespread way. So there's a number of standards being developed in SC42 at the moment. And we see on the screen here a number of different kind of buckets of different types of standards. We've got foundational standards, which have been defining terminology and concepts broadly from an artificial intelligence perspective, but then also taking a bit more deeper dive in machine learning as well. And the intention there is to define terminology that can underpin discussions and policy making and a cross-level understanding between multiple stakeholders through setting the language around artificial intelligence. And then also we're looking at defining various artificial intelligence concepts, primarily at a high level, to provide broad understanding amongst different stakeholders of what various concepts are related to artificial intelligence, and then the deeper dive into machine learning effectively then starts to explore the various aspects of machine learning from, let's say, the use of data, the different types of data sets required to train and validate a machine learning model, through to various software tools and techniques used to either do the development or the verification and testing aspects. So that includes an overview of the different types of algorithms, different types of learning methods, and within both of those foundational standards, from the AI perspective and the machine learning perspective, they're really underpinned by an AI system lifecycle. So how the system goes from inception to retirement, through various stages. And that's also been used to underpin a lot of other standards work going on, including how to define a data lifecycle framework, for example. Recently published is a governance implications of the use of AI in organizations. And that's really about providing guidance on the considerations that governing bodies need to factor in when either using or developing artificial intelligence. And so by providing guidance on good governance approaches to AI, that the intention there is to, from the top down in organizations, have that responsible or accountable perspective on using artificial intelligence. And then alongside that, the risk management framework for artificial intelligence primarily extends the ISO 31000 risk management framework, specifically to extend it for artificial intelligence. And it goes through various processes and guidance on doing risk assessment, risk identification, risk treatment related to artificial intelligence. There's various trustworthy projects that are ongoing, how to treat unwanted bias, guidance on transparency and explainability of artificial intelligence systems, and then also new work on controllability as well. And so trustworthiness is actually more or less the biggest group within subcommittee 42, and also one of the primary interests from the BSI committee as well. We're also developing an AI management system, and that's really the heart of today's session, which we'll go into in a moment. So that uses the common management system concept in order to provide requirements and guidance on implementing management systems within an organization. And then, of course, the idea of continually improving those management processes. And then alongside that is the development of an impact assessment of AI system standard. So how do you implement processes to support impact assessments for AI systems within an organization, but also then what kind of aspects would you need to consider when performing an impact assessment? And so that standard is currently on the ballot, so the proposal will be either approved or not by national standards bodies, and the work should be kicked off later on this year. There's an extensive series on data quality management, and so data being a key factor in the development of AI systems, and especially using machine learning. There's a huge body of work going on there, which now is probably up to about 5 parts in that series, and those are under development at the moment. There's also a quality model for AI systems being developed, and that extends some of the software engineering concepts around quality models in order to factor in various characteristics of artificial intelligence systems and providing guidance on what those mean from a quality perspective. And then recently, there's been testing of AI systems work being kicked off, and that's jointly with the software engineering and testing folks from Subcommittee 7 of JTC1. And then there's many others that are also being developed as well. And the UK committee has taken various leadership positions regarding many of these projects. So project editors for one of the foundational standards, the governance standards, and also the quality and testing standards as well. And we've been deeply contributing into the development of other standards as well. So let's get into the management system standard and effectively how to provide guidance on the responsible use and development of AI systems. So, the question here is, how can AI be developed and used in a way that is responsible and that leads to trust and assurance for consumers and other stakeholders? And what is the role of standards in creating this trust and assurance? So the management system standard here is key for that. And it also allows you to demonstrate accountability. It will be one of those standards that will be the basis for conformity assessment as well, and certification. And it also allows you to define what responsible means within the context of your own organization as well. So it's a very flexible approach to conformity, but also for effective accountability and demonstrating due diligence. So a bit of background about management systems standards and what exactly is ISO IEC 42001, which is the AI management system, which we can shorten to AIMS within this presentation. So it's effectively a set of requirements that define management processes, which allow for a risk-based approach that is continually improved, or so effectively iterations on these management processes to ensure that they take into account the evolving landscape of risk, for example, and of course the evolving objectives of the organization, and also factoring into that the evolving regulatory landscape as well. So it's based on a common high-level structure of management system standards, which have a set of management system processes that are defined as requirements. So we see on the graphic on the right-hand side. The left of that shows what those management clauses are, and we can go through that very briefly as we go through this slide on the screen at the moment. The idea of having that common high-level structure is that you can then integrate different management systems within an organization. And so we have the quality management system 9001. There's, for example, the management system for service management, the ISMS, the information security management system, and also extending that to privacy as well. And so all of these perspectives can be integrated into a set of processes within the organization. And we'll come into the flexibility of using management systems within organizations later on. So I mentioned that one of the key aspects of management system standards is to demonstrate an iterative process and continuous improvement for an organization. And therefore, as an organization goes through its journey of what responsible use or development of artificial intelligence means for them, and as the regulatory landscape changes, and so their compliance with legislation, for example, evolves, these can be factored into the management processes within the organization and continuously evolved. It's risk-based, and so it scales from the risks associated with using low risk or high risk applications of artificial intelligence, and also flexible enough to be applied to different types of organizations and different sizes of organizations. And so that's a key point there, is that even though it's a single set of requirements, what that management system is when it's implemented in different types of organizations and different contexts and uses of artificial intelligence becomes very different organization to organization. And then, as per other management system standards, conformity assessments, particularly third-party conformity assessment and certification based on this standard will be applicable. Alongside, so if we go into the management clauses, effectively you define what your organization is, what its objectives are, what laws and regulations and other requirements from, say, customers you need to take into account. There is the leadership buy-in in terms of making leadership aware of the use of the management system and keeping them abreast of how it's evolving and how it performs and the improvement planning. But also to allow leadership to set policies, for example, and to approve various aspects of management processes. There is the planning aspect of that, which primarily includes the risk management aspects. So do your risk assessment, identify your risks, and then plan a risk treatment approach to managing those risks. And part of that risk treatment planning is the implementation of organizational and technical measures, and we've defined a set of those within the annexes of the management system standards. There is the support and resources required to implement these management processes, and then how do you put it into action within the organization? How do you monitor and evaluate its performance, and then how do you plan for iterative improvements of these processes in order to meet the organization's objectives and also its duty of care to various stakeholders as well. So within the controls and guidance aspects of the document within the annex, effectively we've provided a baseline broad set of horizontal organizational technical measures, guidance on how to implement policies within the organization related to artificial intelligence, what type of resources will you require and the planning required for that. So whether it's from a human resource perspective and the skilling associated with various roles that need to be defined within an organization, but also what kind of resources you'll require from a compute perspective, or access to various platforms that offer tools to develop artificial intelligence, as an example. And then some guidance on how to conduct impact assessments of AI systems. And so the interesting point there is, as we go through the planning of the planning processes of the management system, not only is it including the risk management aspect, but also has a requirement on considering the need for an impact assessment on various stakeholders. And so we can look at risk, for example, as risk to the organization. We can look at impacts as, for example, impacts to stakeholders, to consumers, users, and other stakeholders as well. And understanding those impacts is key to understanding what effectively the risks are to the organization as well, so that the result of an impact assessment can feed into your risk management. There are aspects of, what does it mean to be responsible in the development or the use of AI systems, and we look at that from a life cycle perspective, and whether that's from what kind of considerations you need to take during the development versus what kind of considerations you need to take during the use of these AI systems. As data is a key component of AI systems, there's a lot of controls and guidance related to the use of data, understanding where your data is coming from, ensuring that you are treating it in the right way to ensure that unwanted bias is mitigated to the extent possible, and to ensure that then the outcomes of your AI system are as intended from the objectives of actually developing or using those systems, and that the outcomes actually provide you the results that you're intending. So if it's a system that's providing outputs that are related to people, for example, ensuring or mitigating the possibilities for discrimination, for example, is something that you'd be very interested in taking into account. And then, of course, there's the third-party relationship aspect. So you might be taking various components to develop these systems from suppliers, and you might be using a system that you bought from someone else, and of course selling a system onto somebody else. So there's a number of relationships in a supply chain there, and the use of a management system for supply chain management is quite a common concept as well. So we talked about the flexibility of management system standards, and here on the screen, a few points about the scalability of management system standards. We talked about the integration of different types of management systems into an organization and its processes, but also the ability for the management system to scale and to take into account different regulatory environments, but also as the needs or objectives of the organization change, as can the processes that support that. And then when there's a need for new compliance offerings, so for example, we have the management system standard for artificial intelligence, but then if there are sector-specific requirements that need to be added to that, those can also be factored into the management processes as well. And we'll also think about what does it mean from demonstrating your trustworthy approach to artificial intelligence from a horizontal perspective versus what does it mean to meet sector-specific requirements and regulations. And then we also talked about how the flexibility based upon a risk-based approach means that the management system standard can apply to all types and sizes of organizations. And the way that the requirements and the controls are written, it's really about defining or providing guidance on what to do and not how to do it. So it's not prescriptive in that sense and not dependent on specific types of technology or even the risk of prescribing technology that becomes quickly obsolete. And then, of course, as the regulatory environment changes, we have the Draft AI Act from the EU, the UK also thinking about its approach to regulation and legislation related to artificial intelligence, and then similar frameworks around the world. Those can be taken into account into the management system and help with an organization's journey on the compliance to various regulatory frameworks. And as a result, the management system is effectively an enabler for customer trust and sales enablement. And then through the use of certification of third-party conformity assessment, being able to demonstrate your accountability, your duty of care, and show to your customers or consumers that you have taken a responsible approach to developing and using artificial intelligence. And then we can also see how these management system processes integrate into the governance, risk, and compliance frameworks within an organization and across the organization. So here we've got a few bullets that come from the scope of 42001, and effectively, as per any other management system, it's for establishing, implementing, maintaining, continuing improving the management system, and there's requirements and guidance around that. And then, as we mentioned, it's a set of management processes to help an organization develop or use AI systems responsibly, pursuing its objectives. And we talked about already how to meet regulatory requirements and then the expectations from interested parties as well. And effectively, this helps enable trust in the organization, but also trust in the AI systems it develops or uses as well. It's a risk-based approach. We've talked about the controls and the guidance to implement organizational and technical measures to mitigate risks. And these also include system-level controls. So as we normally think about management systems being organizational, many of the measures that are defined within aims, for example, are applicable directly to the system as well. And then the interesting point, as we mentioned before, is the incorporation of an AI system impact assessment. We also have debates at the moment on how mandatory to make a requirement, whether it's just to consider an AI impact assessment, or whether you must always perform an AI impact assessment when using or developing artificial intelligence systems. And that can feed into the organizational risk management processes. And then the last 2 points we've covered already in earlier discussion. So the graphic here effectively demonstrates how a management system standard can be used within an organization and how it can be used within the ecosystem of compliance, risk, and governance. So in the triangle, or pyramid, if you like, underpinning the actual management system implementation within the organization is 42001, so the management system requirements and the guidance and controls. And then within that, on top of that sits policies that are defined by the organization for how it takes a responsible approach to using or developing artificial intelligence. And then the implemented processes within the organization. And then on top of that, what kind of measures are implemented both from an organizational perspective, but also from a system perspective as well. And so supporting the implementation of the management system, we have other standards at our disposal. So for example, the governance implications of the use of artificial intelligence, its standard is 38507. Effectively can be used when as guidance for when you just define the context of the organization, or in particular the leadership aspects of the management system processes. And then the risk management for AI standard 23894 can feed guidance into how you do your risk assessment, how you develop your risk treatment plan, and then also how you do risk identification as well. And that's using the common risk management framework, ISO 31000, as a basis. And we talked about the flexibility of taking into account sector-specific requirements and regulations, for example. And those can also be built into the management system. So on top of the requirements and guidance in 42001, we can define additional standards which can contain additional controls and guidance, which might be sector specific or for particular aspects related to artificial intelligence systems, but also taking into account existing regulatory frameworks for sector specific or product specific requirements or regulations. It can also be built on top. And so once you have that framework in place, you can start to think about how do I get into the whole conformity assessment aspect of this. And so certification bodies, the intention is that they will provide certification conformity assessment based upon aims similar to, for example, 27001 for information security management system. And of course, the accreditation aspect that goes along with it effectively then allows you to certify once, let's say regionally, if you're a multinational organization, and then have your certification recognized globally as well. And then by achieving that type of certification, you can demonstrate accountability and your duty of care to customers, and effectively use that as an enabler of trust between organizations, or between organizations and their customers or consumers. So we talked about how we can certify to this management system standard, but within, let's say, the realm of digital services or information technology, management system standards have been a primary use of certification mechanisms. And so 27001 for information security is a prime example. And globally, that's come to be identified as a measure of trust that organizations have taken the right steps to ensure that they are taking a strong approach to their information security processes, but also their approach to preserving the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of information. And so similarly for artificial intelligence, we intend that by getting the certification to AIMS, organizations can demonstrate that they're doing the right thing. And then also from a product perspective, trust in an organization that is doing the right thing. The expectation is that the products that they develop or use can also be trusted. And we talked about how supply chain management is a prime example of the use of management system certifications, and how that enables trust across the supply chain, and also enables, for example, new business opportunities. So we talked about how management system standards are primarily about trusting the organization, and also it's a certification against the organization, not a product certification. But there is a strong expectation on product certification for artificial intelligence systems. And so we're looking at a novel way of factoring into certification both the organizational aspect, but also the product aspect as well. And then for those of you who are familiar with the certification processes and conformity assessments, standards and requirements on certification bodies, organizational conformity assessment, product conformity assessment, really take two different approaches from a conformity assessment perspective. And the intention with AIMS is that we'll be able to certify the organization against the requirements of AIMS, but also consider the organizational technical measures to be factored into a product type certification as well. So it's also an approach that is being explored, also related to certification for GDPR within Europe, and so there's precedence of using a management system for both organizational and product certification. So in summary, the management system standard will be a key component for providing trust and assurance of AI systems, and enable trust between organizations and hopefully enable new business opportunities, but also accelerate market adoption of these technologies as well. So that's it for the session today, and I'm happy to take questions if we've got time for that.
There's some questions in the chat, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like there are.
Okay, I need to switch screens in order to view those. I've got, thanks for the insights there. Here we go, chat. Right, so we've got a question about the adoption of 42001. So it's still currently within its development. We're at the committee draft stage, and so there's still time for new guidance and controls to be added to that. You know, if there are folks interested in reviewing the standard and contributing, commenting against it, there's certainly possibility for that. I should have actually added my contact on the slides, but I'll put that in the chat as well, so you can have my contact. And there's a few comments about audio. I hope that wasn't an issue through the entirety of the presentation. Apologies if that was. It might just be my crackly voice instead. And then the Trustworthiness Working Group in JTC1. Exactly. So Linda, SC42, I believe, has been part of that trustworthiness conversation within JTC1. And then we've got Tim Webb, who's asked about sustainability expertise. There is some, and there's new work being initiated both at the SC42 level, but also at the Sensen at JTC21 level as well. And we have a colleague within the committee in the UK who is leading that work on sustainability, and they come from the National Physics Laboratory. So we certainly welcome more expertise in that area. It's certainly very nascent, and you know, at some point there'll be consistent ways of approaching sustainability and energy estimation, for example, of AI workloads across different types of systems and hardware, etc. And what do I think is the single biggest sustainability issue for AI development? Well, I think it probably spans across the entirety of things from hardware to the amount of data and energy it takes to train models. So I think there's numerous aspects, and right now I think it's probably too early to say it's one thing or another that really is the most salient aspect. Okay, and then we've got Frank again. Yes, so there's certainly standardization taking place in the IEEE, for example, and then also ETSI is also doing work on artificial intelligence, but they've been more or less integrated into the European standard system. So they're working very closely with JTC21 in order to ensure that they can contribute into the standards work at the European level, but also to ensure that there is consistency across the work going on in Senselec as well as within ETSI. And the question from Mateus is whether these standards will be applicable to public sector and local governments, and are there any additional provisions, reflections to help that target group? So the intention, especially for the management system standard and the standards that support it, like governance and risk management, are intended to be applicable to all types of organizations. And that includes also the trustworthiness and data quality standards as well. So one of the key things within the standards development within SC42 is that we've been keen to make sure that the requirements or guidance can be applicable to different types of stakeholders, different types of organizations as well. and then not only for certain sectors or for large industry, but also take into account the needs of SMEs, for example, but also what does it mean from a public sector perspective, when you're thinking about the responsible use and development of artificial intelligence. So we have public sector engagement within the committee, and also folks from various government departments, for example, from DCMS or the CDEI. And yes, Tim would be very happy if you reach out at some point regarding sustainability. I would be very happy to chat, and if you'd like to join the committee, we can also discuss that as well. Yeah, so we've been asked to wrap up. Are there any final questions that we can use for discussion today? We've got 2 or 3 minutes left. Give it 30 more seconds for people to type something. So please do reach out to either your contacts at the BSI or directly to me, and I'd be very happy to discuss how you can get involved in our standards development as well. Thank you very much for participating in the session.